this video, we're going to discuss the topic of telemental health supervision. We want to talk about for a few minutes what it looks like to provide supervision in an online environment using telemental health. There's four objectives that we want to cover in this video. Number one, we want to define traditional view of supervision. We want to look at some of the seminal works that are out there on supervision to see how they apply to us today in the work of telemental health supervision. We also want to review supervision styles. There are many styles of supervision that are out there, and we want to review and see what those look like. We also want to look at the efficacy of telemental health supervision. From studies that are out there, we want to see whether or not it's effective when individuals use telemental health supervision. And also the ethics of telemental health supervision. We'll once again be going back to the 2014 ACA Code of Ethics to see what it says about supervision and how do we provide this in an online environment. First of all, we need to define what is supervision. There's two definitions here I think are two good ones to help us to kind of set the mode for this training. The first one says this: it's an intensive, interpersonally focused, one-to-one relationship in which one person is designated to facilitate the development of therapeutic competence in the other person. And of course, this comes from Logan, Bill, Hardy, and Delworth. I thought this was a good definition for us to start with because it helps us to get the biggest portion for us to understand is that we are facilitating development. That as new supervisees come in, we're bringing them from a place of whether they're just coming from graduate school or not, for helping them to see and bring together all the knowledge they have and be able to actually practically use that as they grow as a therapist. That from day one, as they become a new supervisee, we want to build on the skills they have. We want to help them to become more competent. We want to see them to grow. And I think one of the great things about being a supervisor is seeing that growth process happen for a supervisee. That we get to see them go from someone who really is unsure of themselves, is really unsure of their skills, to the place where they become a colleague of ours, where they're able to provide feedback and they're able to see how to go about doing diagnosis in the proper way, how to follow ethics, and to be able to clinically work through a situation or a case using the skills they have obtained through grad school and also through supervision. And so we are facilitating development of individuals. But there's another aspect that we want to look at it as well. It says to socialize novices into the particular profession's values and ethics, to protect clients, and finally to monitor the supervisee's readiness to be admitted to profession. And so part of this is also a socialization process as well. That as we do supervision, whether it's an individual process or whether we do group supervision, we're trying to make sure they are able to walk away knowing the values and ethics of their code that they're going to follow. We're trying to protect clients and making sure they're doing that in the right way, and also their readiness to be admitted to the profession. And so as we think about the term of gatekeeping, that as we're called, this is something that is a continual process. It goes through our graduate school, it even continues up and through the point of them becoming a licensed therapist. And even after the fact, we continue to do gatekeeping. We want to continue to find ways to supervise individuals and make sure we're getting supervision ourselves. That way we are making sure we're doing the best we possibly can to protect the clients that we're working with. When it comes to supervision styles, I want to talk about three particular ones that I've seen in the field. And once again, neither of these are like better than the other one. It's just different approaches that people take to supervision. For one, we have as what we call the authoritative style of supervision. From this style, we have what we'll call a power differential between a supervisor and other group members. Basically, the supervisor comes in as the expert. They know they come in knowing the knowledge and the competence that they need to be able to pass this knowledge and competence down to the supervisees. And so these group members look to the supervisor for everything that they need. And so there is a definite differential of power that's there, where the supervisor is up high and the group members are basically on the outside or underneath that supervisor, gaining knowledge from that person. But like I said, there's a power differential there for that. And this is, once again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just depending on the person's personality or the type of supervision they plan on doing. Can be an effective manner for providing supervision. Then there's what we call participative supervision. And this is where the supervisor becomes a part of the group and each person is on an equal footing. Even though the supervisee may be paying the supervisor for their supervision services, the supervisor approaches it in a way in which everyone has an equal say in what's going on in supervision, and it decreases the power differential there. Now, obviously, the supervisor still is in charge of signing paperwork and monitoring the supervisee as they work with them. But we see a little bit more of a participative nature where each group member kind of brings things to the table as they do supervision. And then third, we have the cooperative method. And this is where the supervisor is still in charge of what's going on, but they're not necessarily a part of the group, but they're basically facilitating interactions in between the rest of their supervisees. And so each one of the group members have something to share. They bring those things together, and the supervisor becomes more of a facilitator. Now, obviously, it's possible for a supervisor to, depending on their counseling or supervision style, they can fluctuate between these different styles of supervision. They could start off being very authoritative towards the beginning of the process. They may move towards participative towards the middle, and then towards the end be more cooperative. It's really up to them on how they want to do that. But these are some traditional supervision styles that we have seen in the past, and I believe that these will still work very well even in a telemental health environment. And so the next thing we want to look at is the efficacy of telemental health supervision. And so the question we have to be able to answer is, how do you measure supervision effectiveness? How do I know if what I'm doing as a supervisor is being effective with the people I am working with? And so from this article that we found here, when it comes to the efficacy of telemental health supervision, this is what they have to say about supervision. It says supervision, whether in the same room or via the internet, is effective to the extent that it facilitates growth in professional identity. And so from Perry, from this 2012 article, is basically saying as long as the supervisee is growing their professional identity, whether we're in the same room with them or whether it's over the internet, as long as they're growing, then supervision is effective. And I tend to agree with this viewpoint. There's several different ways of approaching supervision. There's several different models of supervision, where you are looking from the developmental model, whatever model you choose to use for supervision. There's different models out there, but at the end of the day, whether they're in the same room with me or whether or not they're online, the question is, are your supervisees growing in their professional identity? Do they know what their job is as a professional? Do they know their ethics? And if we're able to say yes to that, and we're able to show their growth, then that shows that what we're doing is efficacious, and they're growing in that manner. There's a study that came out in 2011. It was a Cybersupervision study. In this study, they had 5 female supervisees who volunteered for online practicum experience. And so this was during their grad school experience. What they did with this supervision is that they had a face-to-face orientation meeting where each person came together for the supervision and did in a traditional environment. The rest of the experience, 100% of it, was done through telemental health. Some of it was done synchronously at the same time, and some was done asynchronously. And what they went about in this study was measure the supervisee's confidence as a part of this practice. They looked at supervisee competence, whether or not they felt competent or not, and also the supervisee's attitude about the approach. And so these are the 3 measures they used for this study. And as a result of the study, we found that from the supervisee's confidence increased from being able to do telemental health supervision. That they did see a confidence increase, which is a good thing. That they felt like once they finished supervision, they felt more confident in their skills and abilities that they had. But not only did their confidence increase, their competence increased. The things they knew and been able to put that into practice, they felt like that increased as well. So once again, I believe that's a positive thing. And also the supervisee's attitude about their approach increased, but they wanted it to be optional. And I think this is a very important point for us to remember. That as we look at using telemental health supervision, that we want to make sure this is something that is optional, because this is maybe not be something that every supervisee is interested in doing. So we want to make sure that we do give some options to supervisees on whether or not we want to use telemental health supervision with them, or we use traditional supervision. Now we want to look at some online supervision pros and cons. So what are some of the pros of this method, and what are some things that we need to be aware of that could be considered cons for this approach? One, the pros is more productive sessions due to fewer time restraints. One of the big things we see with telemental health supervision is that when people are able to do it online or through the use of technology, a lot less time is spent traveling. I work with supervisees who live up to 2 hours away from me, and it's nice to be able to jump online and to be able to use video, for example, to be able to have supervision sessions, and a lot less time is worried about them traveling down here and things of that nature, because we're able to see each other through face-to-face through video, and we're spending more time in the session dealing with case issues and with self-care and things of that nature, and not worrying about the time restraints for them with the traveling and driving down. And so whether they're on their lunch break or if it's a little bit later at night or it's on the weekend, different things like that, it opens up the time and so for us to be able to do supervision together. And I feel like the supervision sessions become a lot more productive. Also, more effective use of supervisees and supervisor time. One of the big things about supervision, the supervision does take up a lot of time. And so once again, trying to schedule that and making sure you have enough hours scheduled during a week for your supervisees can become difficult at times. And so if you're trying to put together a group of individuals for supervision and people are not able to come at the same time, once again, be able to use video or to use telemental health makes a big difference for them. Also, it gives us a larger pool of available supervisors. There are several states out there that still have a great shortage of supervisors. They are producing lots of new counselors into the field, but when it comes to people who are qualified to be supervisors, we're seeing some states are showing that they're lacking a number of supervisors. So what ends up happening is, what can happen through the use of telemental health supervision, is that supervisors are now able to broaden their ability to work with more supervisees because there's a lot less restraints on them. They can use a certain amount of time, whether it's through video or through phone or whatever the case may be, and be able to provide supervision for the supervisees, and that way there's more supervisors available to work with those clients, with the supervisees out in the public. And so there are a few pros to this. When it comes to cons, there is sometimes potential expense of technology. There's a lot of great technology that is out there for telemental health. And so the great part about it is some of it is very affordable, but some of it can get a bit pricey and expensive. And so there's a potential expense that comes with using technology. And so the supervisor and the supervisee have to kind of come together to figure out what's going to be the best and most cost-effective way of using technology for them. Also finding and making sure that it's HIPAA secure as well, and that follows everything that we need to be practicing ethically. And so that expense can be an issue at times. Also, varying degrees of experience with technology. This may be on the end of the supervisor, and this could also be on the end of the supervisee. That maybe when it comes to them working and dealing with technology, they may not have a lot of education in technology or how to use it. When it comes to them learning how to embed to use a browser in the right way, or to know how to shut down the computer whenever any type of situations may come up with a virus, whatever the case may be. There's just a lot of situations that can come up with technology, and some people simply just don't know how to do. And so if they're not really familiar with using technology, then this can become an issue for them. And so making sure that the supervisee and the supervisor are both on the same page when it comes to their degree of experience with technology. And also lack of face-to-face contact. A lot of supervision now is being done on the phone. And once again, that's not necessarily unethical depending on where you live and what state you're practicing in, but you do lose some face-to-face contact whenever you are doing it through the phone or something like that. Even if you're using a video service, you're still losing some of the cues that you normally would have if you're doing a traditional supervision. And this doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but once again, it could be a con if you're trying to work with a supervisee and you're really trying to pick up on some things and what they're trying to say. And so when we look at online supervision, there are some things that we consider are positive that we want to consider, but we also want to make sure we cover those things that may be cause some problems for us. And these cons are things that can be worked through, but it's good for us to be aware of them. Next, we want to talk about online supervision ethics. What type of ethics are you using when it comes to supervision? We want to make sure we're looking at that in this video. When it comes from Bernard and Goodyear in their 2009 article, when it talks about supervisor competency, it says this: that first of all, supervisors must be ethical, competent, and have a firm knowledge base. So just in general, if I'm going to become a supervisor, I need to make sure I'm practicing ethically. That means I need to know what my code of ethics says about supervision and making sure I am following that. Also, am I competent? Many states will require you to go through some type of either a graduate course or some type of certification in order to become a supervisor. And so the reason behind that is to make sure you have some competence in this area. And so that becomes a very important thing. And also just a knowledge base of supervision in general. And also, I think to add to this, some good clinical experience. I think it's very hard to be a good supervisor if you don't have a lot of good clinical experience under your belt already. Also, the supervisor must be aware of and reflect upon his or her own abilities and expertise. And so as I'm looking for a supervisor or a supervisee, or as a supervisee looking for a good supervisor, one question may come on is, what abilities and expertise does this person bring to the table? And so if, for example, for me as a supervisor, one thing I don't really deal that much with is eating disorders. That's not a strong area of mine. And so it will probably not be best for me to work with a supervisee who's wanting to work on in a clinic that does eating disorders, because that's not something that I have a lot of expertise in, and so I won't really be that big of a help to that person. And so just making sure that we are looking at our competency and making sure we're competent to provide the services that we're doing. And I think as we consider telemental health, making sure we're competent in that area as well is going to help us to be effective in this manner. Also, informed consent. The supervisor will review the purposes, goals, procedures, limitations, potential risk, and benefits of technology-assisted supervision. So as I am working with my supervisee, before I get a chance to work with them, I need to let them know what they're getting into. And so if I'm using technology-assisted or telemental health supervision, the question then becomes, what process am I going through to help my supervisee to see the purposes and goals of what we're doing as supervisees and supervisor? What is the procedures we'll be doing? Is there a certain percentage we'll be using online? Is there a certain percentage of supervision be done face to face? What does that look like? Also, some of the potential risks and benefits that technology brings. And so making sure that the supervisee understands that from the front, that way they know what they're getting into before they sign up with you as a supervisor. And also, all policies and procedures will be provided in writing and reviewed verbally before or during the initial session. And so once again, just a written consent, just like I would with the client. I'm going to want to get a written consent, informed consent from my supervisee, so they know what the policy and procedures will be for working with me as a supervisor. And so it's good for us to have a good, strong supervision policy that is written out. That way we can provide that for our supervisees to go over that with them, and then once again have that written and signed so they know exactly what they're getting into. Also, supervisor qualifications. First of all, the supervisor will only provide services for which the supervisor is qualified. That's something that we have to always remember, that I'm only providing service for things I'm qualified in. And so if I'm not qualified in technology, then I probably should not be providing supervision in that manner. Also, the supervisor will provide copies of licensure, credentialing, and training upon request. And so I want them to be able to see where I received my training to become a supervisor, if I have a national certification in supervision or a state certification in supervision, also my license as well. Just giving them access to information so they can be well aware of what I'm doing as a supervisor. Also, supervisors providing distance supervision should participate in professional organizations related to distance services and develop a network of professional colleagues for peer and supervisory support. There are a lot of great organizations out there when it comes to dealing with supervision, and also specifically with telemental health supervision. And so I would suggest for you to make sure to be doing some research to look out to see, okay, what is there a group in my state or my region or even an online group that I can be involved with will help give me some good pointers on becoming a good online supervisor. I know there's groups on LinkedIn and groups on Facebook as well that's specifically designed for supervisors, and so these would be some places I would go to look to get better understanding on supervision. Also understand that the Association for Council Educators and Supervisors, they do trainings as well when it comes to distance supervision, and so this is another place for you to get some good education on this topic to make sure you're staying qualified in this area. Some supervisee considerations. Supervisors will screen supervisees for appropriateness to receive services via distance methods. It's important, once again, to make sure I'm screening just like I would with a client. Am I screening the supervisees that I am working with? Because it's important for me to know that they're going to be able to use the service and it's going to be appropriate for them. And so they may live in an area where they don't have strong internet, and so because of that, I may not be able to use telemental health supervision with them, and so I might have to use it do face-to-face or through phone or some other way. Might have to find some different ways of doing it. Also, supervisees must be informed of potential hazards of distance communications. This is important as well for us to realize that there are some hazards to distance communications. There may be some misunderstandings because of the mode in which you're communicating with your supervisee. Once again, if technology is not working, how do we work through the whole process? And just once again, making sure that they understand what to do in those situations. And also, supervisees should be encouraged to review employers' policies regarding using work computers for distance services. There may be an issue as a supervisor that I maybe want to meet my supervisee, maybe during their lunch break at work, and they may try to connect with me through their work computers. Well, the problem is their place of employment may not allow that at all. And so they want to make sure they are checking with their employer to see if it's okay for them to be able to do supervision while they're at work through the use of a computer or phone or whatever the case may be, just because they are still on company time and they're at work during that time period. And so that'll be something good to check out. Also, just modes of communication. The supervisor will review written procedures for the use of distance communication, including telephone, chat, email, social media, and other distance technology. And so, what type of policies do you have set in place for distance communication? Do they know how often they can reach you on the phone and what time they can do that? Are they able to send you an email, and what would response time be for that? Will you connect with them on social media or not? That's something else to consider. And also, just once again, they're comfortable with their distance technology. Also, there will be a clear delineation between professional and personal accounts. That if you're connecting with your supervisees, once again, you want to make sure that it's a professional relationship, and to keep it that way through use of any type of social media and also your accounts. And so, once again, keeping those two identities separate as you're connecting with your supervisees. And also, supervisor to determine how frequent communication should be, what a reasonable response time is, when to use asynchronous versus synchronous communication, and what to do in emergency and crisis situation. The reality is there are going to be some times when you're not going to be in town. You're going to take a break. You're going to practice self-care, whatever the case may be. And so you're going to have some way of knowing how you're going to communicate with your supervisees during those time period. And so that may be a time where asynchronous supervision may come into play. Or do you have a backup supervisor who can take your place during that time period? I know that's something I have to do when I go out of town, that I can connect with a friend who's also a local supervisor, and then they'll watch my supervisees while I'm out of town, and I'll do the same thing for them. And also, what about crisis situations? Are your supervisees able to call you immediately, or do they just immediately connect with their supervisor who's right there on site with them? And so just making sure those modes of communication are talked about and dealt with in the appropriate manner. And record keeping. I think this is one of the biggest things that we want to make sure we spend some time looking at. Is that as we go about looking at record keeping for supervision, there's a few things you want to make sure that you're covering. Obviously, we want to cover the date of the supervision session. When did we meet with the supervisee, and once again, keeping that clear. Also, supervision start and stop times. Every state has a certain amount of time that they want supervisees to be doing supervision, and so you want to make sure you're keeping good records of when your start and stop times are. For each of my supervisees, I do keep an Excel spreadsheet that keeps up with all of their supervision time that we've done together. That way I can be able to report back to my counseling board exactly how often we've met together, and that way there's no question about the amount of supervision they received. Also, the modality of supervision provided. If it's live face-to-face supervision, I want to make sure I'm writing down that way. If it's group supervision, I want to make sure that I document it that way. If I'm using technology as a part of my supervision, I want to make sure I document it that way as well, and just make sure that's very clear in my records when I do that. And also documentation of all written communication during the supervisor relationship, such as chat histories, texts, instant messages, and emails. Now, I think on this last point here, you have to be careful to realize exactly how you plan on connecting with your supervisees. If you don't plan on using any type of chat or software, then that's perfectly fine. But if you do, realize you need to be able to document that as a part of your supervision. If you're sending text back and forth to your supervisees, be careful what type of software you're using, what type of information you're sending back and forth. We'd be careful about that, but once again, you have to document that time. And also, same thing with instant messages and emails. Just being careful on how you are using your software and making sure you're doing it in the right fashion. All right. I do hope that this video has helped give you a little bit better understanding of what it looks like to practice telemental health supervision. Please make sure that you do review your code of ethics to make sure you're practicing this ethically. Also, get in contact with your state counseling board or professional licensure board to see what their expectations are for you if you're going to be using any type of technology when you're doing supervision. Hope you have a great day.